Have you ever wondered why bad things happen to good people? Why do the righteous have to suffer while the wicked prosper? Why does it sometimes seem like God is silent when we need him the most? The answer can be found in the story of Job, a man who lived in the land of Uz. Job was neither a king nor a prophet, but a righteous man who always lived uprightly and honored God. Through his story, Job becomes a symbol of steadfast faith in the midst of hardship. He was the most upright and honest person the earth had ever known. But Job was not just a man of faith, he was also a man of great wealth. His riches were immense, with hundreds of pieces of land filled with livestock and a large number of servants working in his household. He was the wealthiest man in the East, and no one could compare to him. However, his greatest treasure was his family, his 10 children, 7 sons and 3 daughters. They lived together in joy, hosting feasts in their home and enjoying all that God had blessed them with. Despite his great wealth, Job could not sleep peacefully. Each morning, before the first light of dawn broke the sky, he would wake up and pray deeply. With steady hands, he offered burnt offerings for each of his children, for in the depths of his heart, a troubling thought constantly burdened him. Perhaps one of my children has sinned. Perhaps they have cursed God in their hearts. Job understood something that few people know. He knew how fragile blessings could be. So every day without fail, he prayed for them with the fire of sacrifice, not out of fear, but out of love for God and his family. But at that very moment, someone was watching him from heaven. Soon, his perfect world would collapse. The heavens opened into an eternal court, and the sons of God presented themselves before the Lord, beings of light and power, creatures who had gazed upon the vastness of creation. Among them, a shadow walked with unwavering steps, and Satan the wanderer, the accuser, the one who never rests, stood before God. The Lord looked at him, and his voice thundered with power that could not be described. "Where have you come from?" Satan replied. "From roaming throughout the earth, from walking back and forth on it." And indeed, Satan had witnessed everything. He had seen kings rise and fall, cities bloom and turn to ashes. Satan had seen hearts waver, men sell their souls for a handful of gold, and the righteous become betrayers. But among it all, one man stood firm. The Lord knew this and spoke of him with unwavering confidence. "Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He is blameless, upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil." "Does Job fear God for nothing?" Satan replied. "Have you not put a hedge around him and his household and everything he has? You have blessed the work of his hands, so that his flocks and herds are spread throughout the land." Job 1:9-10. Everything he touches prospers: his sheep, his camels, his servants. And you're surprised that he remains faithful? But stretch out your hand and take away everything he has, destroy his possessions, take his children from him, and bring him to the dust of destruction, and he will surely curse you to your face. The trial was set, but the Lord replied firmly, "Everything he has is in your hands, but on the man himself do not lay a finger." An invisible whisper spread through the heavenly assembly. The adversary had been granted permission. Without delay, Satan turned and vanished. The path had been set, and Job's fate was sealed. His faith would be tested in the most severe trial any man had ever faced. The next day, everything was still calm at Job's house. His children gathered for a feast, laughing, sharing bread and wine. In the fields, the cattle were plowing, the donkeys were grazing peacefully, and the servants were taking care of the livestock. Everything seemed stable, but suddenly, disaster struck. The heavens and the earth were signs of judgment, but at that moment, another messenger rushed in, almost stumbling from the despair evident on his face. "Sir, the Chaldeans attacked in 3 raiding parties. Your camels have been stolen, all your servants have been killed by the sword, and I alone have survived to bring this news." Job felt as if the ground beneath his feet had suddenly cracked open. Everything he owned, his entire wealth, had been consumed by fire in an instant. But the worst was yet to come. A 4th messenger entered, but he said nothing. His face spoke all that words could not express. "Sir, your children." Job gripped the seat, his heart pounding in his chest, when suddenly a mighty wind swept in from the desert and struck the four corners of the house. It collapsed on them, and they are dead, and I am the only one who has escaped to tell you. Job 1:19. Job did not want to hear anything more. Job's story may remind you of the pain and loss in your own life. Perhaps you've experienced grief that seems impossible to overcome, such as losing a loved one or facing challenges that seemed insurmountable. But what's important is that, no matter how painful it is, your faith can still stand firm. You may feel discouraged, but God is always by your side, ready to heal your soul. Have you ever experienced the pain of loss and the kind of emotional shock that seemed impossible to overcome? A friend of mine lost his son when he was just 19 years old, going through an unbearable loneliness. But he found comfort in God's word, overcame his sorrow, and realized that no matter how many times we fall, God's love and mercy are always with us. If you've ever faced difficult trials, share your story with us in the comments below. Together, we stand firm, finding faith and hope in the Lord. Amen. The world seemed to stop, and the pain dragged him down into a pit deeper than death itself. In one moment, he lost everything, his wealth, his family, but Job did not complain, nor curse himself or God. Instead, he slowly stood up, his hands trembling, and tore his clothes. With a solemn face, he took a knife and gently shaved his head. The locks of his hair fell to the ground. This was a funeral act, a submission, a complete acknowledgement that his life, power, wealth, and lineage all had been burned to ash. Then he fell to the ground, pressing his face into the dust, and worshipped. His voice echoed in the silence, filled with sorrow. "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Praise be the name of the Lord." This is the greatest lesson in faith. Job had just lost everything, but instead of rebelling, he surrendered to the loss. There were no complaints, no accusations, no demands for explanations. Job did not understand why all of this was happening to him, but instead of turning away from God, he drew even closer to him. He bowed down and worshipped. He acknowledged that everything he had, including his family, was a gift from God, not something he legally possessed. This was his greatest victory. Job's faith helped him fully overcome the disaster, and it grew even stronger. This is the true meaning of Christian faith. Absolute trust in God that makes you more resilient during the toughest times. In Matthew 7, we read about two houses, one built on rock, the other on sand. When the storm comes, only the house on the rock stands firm. In his misery, Job worshipped and overcame Satan's trials, for his faith was not based on what the Lord gave, but on the very nature of God. But Satan was not content with this defeat. In the days that followed, heaven opened again, the heavenly court convened, and Satan appeared once more among the sons of God. The Lord looked at him, and his voice rang with authority. "Where have you come from?" Satan smiled slyly, bowing slightly, as though hiding a dark secret. "I have been roaming throughout the earth." The Lord observed Satan, fully aware of his true intentions. Satan had tested Job and failed. The most righteous man on earth had endured the first trial without faltering. Yet the Lord posed a question that would cause Satan to fail again. "Have you considered my servant Job? Even though you took everything from him, he still holds fast to his integrity. There is no one on earth like him, a blameless and upright man, who fears God and shuns evil. You incited me against him without any reason, yet he remains steadfast." The Lord's words were a crushing blow to the accuser. Job had passed the first trial, and it was a great defeat for Satan, but the enemy was not so easily defeated. He stood before the Lord with a look of fury. The Lord gazed at him, displeased, and responded, "A man will give up everything to save his life." Satan smiled, seeing a weakness in the words. He said, "Stretch out your hand and strike his flesh, and he will surely curse you to your face." The angels fell silent, the trial was set once more, but the Lord did not take his eyes off Job. He understood his heart. "He is in your hands," the Lord declared, "but do not take his life." Without hesitation, Satan descended in fury. No wealth to steal, no children to take, now he would attack Job's body. Job was struck with a terrible disease. His once bright, healthy skin was now covered in rotting sores from head to toe. The pain burned like fire, his body itched and scorched. His skin peeled off in chunks, each step a pain beyond description. He could not sleep as nightmares haunted him. Job was left sitting in the dust and ashes, lost in suffering. He took a broken piece of pottery and began scraping the sores on his body. The pain was too much to bear. As the days passed, the man once great was now but a shadow of himself. News of his suffering spread. All his fame had vanished, and he was no longer the greatest man in the East. Now he was merely a broken body, afflicted with leprosy, surrounded by death. Everyone had abandoned him except for his wife, who had witnessed him lose everything. She saw their wealth vanish and their children buried, and now she saw her husband reduced to a living corpse. Her heart was broken, and she had reached her limit. She approached him, eyes filled with tears, her voice trembling. "Do you still hold on to your integrity? Curse God and die." This is the final strike. The enemy could not make Job curse God, so he used the words of Job's wife. Job closed his eyes, knowing that she too had suffered, but his faith remained unshaken. He lifted his head and replied, "You are talking like a foolish woman. Shall we accept good from God and not trouble?" In all this, Job did not sin in what he said. Job 2:10. With unwavering determination, Job did not allow pain and trials to shake his faith in the Creator. This serves as a powerful reminder for us that even in suffering, our faith must remain firm. If you find strength in Job's story, don't forget to like, share video, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss future videos. Share this video with your friends to spread the message of faith and perseverance in difficult times. Job's trial was not merely about losing everything, it was a test of whether his faith would survive when he had nothing left. And Job did not fall. He stood firm amidst the unrelenting pain. The tragic story of Job spread like wildfire throughout the region. His 3 longtime friends, his counselors, heard the news and were horrified. Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar left everything behind and journeyed together to visit their friend Job. They wanted to comfort him, weep with him, and understand what had happened. But nothing could have prepared them for what they were about to witness. From afar, they saw a figure amidst the ashes, a man sitting on the ground, his body covered in sores, his skin torn, his eyes lost in emptiness. They looked at him, trying to recognize him, but they could not. It couldn't be Job. This was not the most respected man in the East, the wise man, the prosperous man, the one blessed by God. This man was but a shadow of himself. Their hearts broke, unable to be contained, and they wept loudly. Their mourning was so bitter that the servants, travelers, and residents of Uz stopped to listen. Grief overwhelmed them, and they tore their clothes to express their sorrow, but it still wasn't enough. They couldn't just stand there with tears. With trembling hands, they picked up dust from the ground and sprinkled it on their heads, as though by covering themselves with the dirt, they could share the weight of their friend's burden. No words could express it. What do you say to someone in such profound pain? What words can comfort a person who has lost everything? For 7 days and 7 nights, they sat together in complete silence. Job said nothing, nor did they. They understood that the deepest pain cannot be comforted by words. Sometimes, the only thing you can do is be there. And though they believed their silence was a form of comfort, soon enough, words would come, and with them a greater challenge. Then, the silence of 7 days and nights was broken in the most painful way. Job opened his mouth and cursed the day of his birth. He did not curse God, nor his friends. He cursed the day he was born. With a broken voice and distant eyes, he sighed a lament that shook both earth and sky. "Let the day of my birth perish, and the moment I was conceived, let it be wiped from history." The eyes of his friends widened in horror, for they had never heard such words from him. The Job they knew had vanished. His voice was that of a man who had no reason to live, a man who no longer saw purpose in his life. He did not ask for answers, nor for justice. He only wished that he had never existed. His pain knew no end, his suffering had no rest. Why did I not perish at birth? Why was my first breath not my last? If I had died before I was born, I would now be at rest." He longed to turn back time, to disappear before he was born, but he still breathed, still imprisoned in a body that was suffering, in a life that no longer had meaning. Why is light given to the miserable? Why is life granted to those who do not want to exist? Job's words echoed the voice of a soul crushed by suffering, but death did not come. God did not grant him release. His chest heaved with each breath. He no longer ate, no longer slept, no longer had hope for anything. "For what I feared has come upon me. I have no peace, no quietness, I have no rest, but only turmoil comes." His friends looked at him in stunned silence. The silence following Job's lament was heavy, but soon Eliphaz, the oldest of the three friends, could not remain silent any longer. He had heard his friend's pain, but could not understand it. He looked at Job, who had once been his counselor, his teacher, his inspiration. He could no longer keep quiet, and taking a deep breath, he began to speak. "You have instructed many. You have made weak hands strong. You have helped the stumbling to stand. Yet now you fall when disaster strikes. Where is the fear of God? Where is the confidence in the uprightness of your life? Where is your hope?" His voice was sharp, as if Job had forgotten what he had once taught. "Job, has any innocent man ever perished without cause?" The other two friends looked at each other and nodded silently. Eliphaz's reasoning was clear. God is just. He punishes the wicked, and if Job is suffering, surely he must have done something wrong. His words were like a poisoned arrow. He did not directly accuse Job, but the doubt hung in the air. If Job is suffering, surely he must have sown something wicked. They are destroyed by the breath of God, consumed by his anger. The roar of the lion grows faint. The roar of the wild beast weakens, their teeth are broken, and the old lion dies for lack of prey. A moment of silence passed, then Eliphaz's tone changed. His gaze seemed to cloud as he recalled something that he believed had been revealed to him in a vision. "Can a mortal be more righteous than God? Can even a strong man be more pure than his maker? If God places no trust in his servants, if he charges his angels with error," Job 4:17-18. Eliphaz did not directly insult his friend, but he trapped Job in a web of harsh and uncompromising reasoning. His words implied that Job must have done something to deserve this suffering, that perhaps it was his pride that had blinded him to his own mistakes. Job, the righteous man, sat in his misery, criticized by Eliphaz, his friend. Eliphaz believed Job's suffering was a punishment from God for sin, and he advised Job to seek God for healing. Eliphaz believed that God could save Job from his trials if he recognized that the correction was for his benefit. However, Job could not comprehend the reason for the pain he was enduring. He felt that his suffering was too great to bear any longer. Job longed for death as a release, but the pain continued. He lamented that his strength was drained, and he could no longer go on. Job looked up and met the eyes of his friends. Anger flared in his eyes. "The suffering ones hope to find comfort from a friend," he said bitterly, "but you have betrayed me. You saw me in my agony, and instead of supporting me, you backed away in fear. Did I ask for help? Did I ask for your possessions? Did I beg for deliverance from the oppressor?" A silence fell over the group of friends. Job needed nothing from them. He only wanted understanding. Job raised his voice, and with a vacant look, he cried out, "I would rather die than continue to breathe." Eliphaz had come to comfort him, but in his effort, he only added to the burden of Job's suffering. Job would never accept blame for things he did not do. His suffering seemed to have no reason, but his faith remained firm. Suddenly, Bildad from Shua spoke up. He believed the situation was clear. God is just, and if Job's children had died, they must have sinned. With a serious tone, Bildad said to Job, "When will you stop speaking meaningless words like the strong wind? If you seek God with humility, plead with him sincerely, and live uprightly, God will rise up for you and restore your family." Bildad tried to bring hope, although his voice still carried judgment. "Your beginnings will seem humble, so prosperous will your future be. Ask the former generation and find out what their ancestors learned, for we were born only yesterday and know nothing, and our days on earth are but a shadow. Job 8:7-9. The solution seemed simple. If Job were upright, God would restore him. But if his suffering continued, could that not be a sign that he needed to recognize his own wrongs? Job looked up, utterly exhausted. His friends insisted that his suffering must be the consequence of his own sin, but Job knew that no one could truly justify themselves before God. What you say is true, but how can anyone argue with God? He is not like me, so we cannot argue face to face. God is wise, powerful, and unshakable. He stretched out the heavens with his hands, and his wonders are countless. But even when he passes by me, I do not see him. Even when he acts, I cannot comprehend it. Though I am righteous, I cannot defend myself. All I can do is plead with him. The world is in the hands of the wicked. The judges are all blind. If it were not for the Lord permitting this, who would do it? The Lord has condemned me already, so why should I keep trying? Finally, his voice broke. Why, Lord, are you treating me this way? What have I done to deserve this punishment? I no longer wish to live. My soul is tired of this life. Why did you create me just to make me suffer? Zophar, the Naamathite, looked at Job with a stern expression. To him, everything was clear. Job had sinned and was receiving the punishment he deserved, with no mystery and no room for debate. Will all these words be answered? He sneered. You still cling to your righteousness? His eyes flashed with anger. To Zophar, Job was not a victim but a fool, refusing to acknowledge his mistakes. If only God would speak to you and reveal the truth, you would understand. If you truly repent, if you seek God and turn from evil, you will be restored. His message was clear. Job needed to humble himself, acknowledge God's justice, and accept his punishment. But Job could no longer hold back. His response was not just full of pain, but also filled with anger. He stood up, his face hardening with suffering. Do you think you have the wisdom of God? He looked at them with disdain. Have you become the spokesman for the Almighty? Do you think only you understand the truth? Job's patience had run out. He could not take it any longer. His friends had judged him, accused him, and treated him like an unrepentant sinner. But Job knew that his suffering was unjust, that his life had been straightforward and his faith in God sincere. If he could not find justice among men, he would speak directly to God. He lifted his face to the sky, his eyes full of tears, and with a trembling voice, he cried out to the Almighty, Why, Lord, are you treating me as if I were your enemy? If there is anything in me that has caused you to condemn me, show me. If I have sinned, let me know. Why won't you forgive me and end this suffering? These words escaped his lips with his last strength. He could not understand the suffering, but Job did not see justice, yet he continued to trust in God. Job was broken, but he still believed with fierce faith. He declared, Even though you slay me, I will still trust in you. Suddenly the wind began to rise, a gentle breeze quickly turning into a violent storm. The voice of the Lord thundered from the storm. Who is this who darkens my counsel with words without knowledge? Brace yourself like a man. I will question you, and you will answer me. Job, who had asked to meet God, now stood before the Almighty. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Tell me if you understand. Who marked off its dimensions? Surely you know. Who stretched a measuring line across it? Job could barely breathe. God did not explain his suffering. He did not give reasons, but instead expressed Job's insignificance. Who shut up the sea behind doors when it burst forth from the womb? Have you ever given orders to the morning or shown the dawn its place? Job felt his heart shrink. God owed him no explanation. He is the Creator, and the entire universe depends on his will. For the first time, Job understood the hardest truth to accept. God is so immense that humanity cannot comprehend him fully. Job had asked for answers, but God gave him a different perspective, and faced with his glory, Job fell completely silent. God continued to speak to him. Will you discredit my justice? Will you condemn me to justify yourself? Job felt an overwhelming weight in his heart break apart. He had no more words, no more arguments, no more demands. Then, God continued, "Would you discredit my justice? Would you condemn me to justify yourself?" A shiver ran through Job's body. He had done this. He had wanted God to explain his suffering. He had hoped that God would prove his innocence. But now he understood that God's justice needed no explanation. God began to describe his creation in greater detail. He spoke of Behemoth, a mighty beast he had made, with bones like iron bars and a strength no one could overpower. He spoke of Leviathan, an unbeatable sea monster, with fire breathing from its mouth and eyes shining like the dawn. No one could challenge it. No one could control it. If no one can face the creatures I have made, then who can challenge me? Job could not contain himself any longer. He bowed deeply, fell to the ground, and confessed, his voice trembling, "I know that you can do all things. No purpose of yours can be thwarted. I had heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eye sees you." His heart had surrendered. Previously, he had spoken without understanding, doubted without seeing the greatness of God. God did not provide answers. He gave him his presence, and that was enough. Job, the man who had lost everything, now had everything, not because his suffering was explained, but because he had witnessed God's glory. In that moment, he repented in the dust and ashes. But the story was not over. God turned his gaze toward Job's friends who had spoken without truly understanding. God said to them, "My anger burns against you, for you have not spoken the truth about me, as my servant Job has." The one who had called for judgment had been declared righteous by God. Those who had accused him now faced judgment. God instructed them to bring offerings and make sacrifices. But there was one more surprise. "My servant Job will pray for you, and I will accept his prayer on your behalf." Job, the one they had despised and judged, would now intercede for their souls, and Job did so. In his heart there was no bitterness. He prayed for those who had hurt him with their words. And when he prayed, a miracle happened. The Lord restored his life, giving him back double all that he had lost. Those friends and family who had forsaken him now returned to comfort him and bring him wealth. His livestock thrived again, and God did not only restore him, he doubled him. But the most beautiful thing had yet to come. The Lord gave him new children, 7 sons and 3 daughters, and these daughters were the most beautiful in the land. Their names reflected the beauty and blessings of this new chapter in his life. Jama means a bright day, like the dawn after a long night. Kazia symbolizes the fragrance of spices, a symbol of purity and joy, and Kirin Hapuk means horn of antimony, a symbol of honor and brilliance. The sun rose over the land, lighting up the fields that had once been in ruins. Job now walked among his thriving herds, surrounded by his children, witnessing what he never thought he would see again. Yet his greatest treasure was no longer wealth, livestock, or even the restored family. His greatest treasure was his faith, stronger than ever. Now he understood what he could not grasp before. Oh, the depth of the riches of the wisdom and knowledge of God! How unsearchable his judgments, and his paths beyond tracing out. Romans 11:33. He no longer needed answers, for he had seen the glory of God, and that was enough. The man who once lamented his existence now lived a blessed life. Years passed, and Job lived another 140 years. He saw his children's children, and passed away, old and full of life, in peace. The story of Job is not a story about suffering, but a story about redemption. Job never received an answer to what he sought. God did not explain why he had to suffer, nor did he reveal the heavenly conversation between him and Satan, or the purpose behind Job's trial. But Job received something greater. He received God. God showed him the universe, the vastness of creation, and the smallness of man before his glory. And in that moment, Job understood that he had heard of God by the ear, but now he had seen him with his own eyes, and that was enough. This was truly his final ending, his true reward, not wealth, not the restoration of his family, but having seen God with his own eyes. The question for you is, are you willing to trust God even when you don't understand why? Thank you for following today's heartfelt story, a story that demonstrates the power of faith in the face of great challenges. Although Job had to endure suffering that seemed impossible to explain, his trust in God never wavered. A model of resilience and absolute faithfulness, even when everything seemed to be against him. This makes us reflect: is your faith strong enough, like Job's, to stand firm through life's storms? Share your thoughts below this video. We would love to hear from you. Thank you for joining us on our journey through Bible stories. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to hit the like, share video, and subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss other meaningful videos from us. Let's continue exploring profound lessons from the Bible. Remember, every challenge is an opportunity for our faith to grow stronger. We look forward to seeing you in our next videos.